Are you Sergeant Byrd? Yep, in the flesh, the one and only. That's Byrd with a Y, by the way. I can't fly, but I won't crap on your windshield either. Well, what are you supposed to say to that? I pointed to the name stripe sewn over the pocket of his flak jacket. It read Byrd T. What's the T stand for? Theophilus, middle name of James. You can call me Ted if you want to be informal about it. I'll call you ma'am, unless you have another moniker you prefer to be referred by. Jamie's fine, I told him. You think you could teach me how to develop this roll of film? I held it up. My brother sent it to me from Vietnam. Sergeant Byrd eyed the film with interest. Where's he at? He's with the 51st Medical Company in Phu-Bai, I told him. He's a medic. Hard job, no gun, no glory, a lot of bullet dodging. Medics are the true war heroes, if you want my opinion. That's when I decided I liked Sergeant Byrd. He set down the camera bag he was carrying and motioned me to toss him the film cartridge. Good film, medium speed, which is right for the kind of photography I bet he's doing, he said, examining it. And black and white, which makes our job a lot easier. Color processing is a headache. It's better just to send color film to a lab. He picked up a large white plastic spool from the counter. You ever see one of these things? It's called a film reel. The hardest part of the job, you've got to get the film from the cartridge onto this baby, and you've got to do it blind. He pointed to a door on the other side of the room. You sit in that little closet over there and make it happen. In the dark? What if I ruin the film before it's even developed? Sergeant Byrd reached into his bag and pulled out another film cartridge, which he handed to me. You can practice on this one. I'll shout directions to you through the door. I don't want to ruin your film, I protested. Ain't nothing but a thing, my young friend, said Sergeant Byrd. I'm all about the process. The end product is less important to me. You ruin some film? Big deal. I'll make more pictures. I took the film reel, a canister, and a canister cover into the closet and closed the door. I was in complete darkness. Okay, what do I do first? I asked, fumbling around, trying to feel what was the reel and what was the canister holding on to the film cartridge for dear life. He walked me through the process. I unwound the film from its spool and slid one end of it into a slot on the outer edge of the reel. The tricky part was loading the film onto the reel, which meant catching the edges of the film on the reel's teeth. This took me about 20 tries and a lot of hot-blooded cussing to accomplish. Once I finally got the film loaded, all I had to do was insert the reel into the canister and cover it. That part was a cinch. I think I'm ready to open the door now, I told Sergeant Byrd. Is the canister lid on tightly? I think so. Then emerge and let's see how you did. Sergeant Byrd was full of high praise for my work. I've never seen anyone figure out how to load a film of reel that fast, he told me. You're a natural, kid. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. I'd never been called a natural at anything before. I was good at several things, throwing a football, unknotting knots, multiplying fractions. I could draw hands that almost looked real, except the thumbs were never 100% right. But no one had ever noticed a pure, natural-born talent in me before. You ready to try your brother's film? I nodded. Combat ready. A shadow seemed to pass over Sergeant Byrd's face. Let's call this a combat-free zone. How about it? Combat-free, duty-free, fancy-free. Land of the free, home of the brave. He smiled and handed me TJ's film. Time to get to work. What do you say, pal? Okay, I told him. I think I can do it. He patted me on the shoulder. Oh, you can do it all right. Like I said, you're a natural. He was right. I was. Chapter 5. TJ started taking pictures in junior high school when we were stationed in an army post in Bad Kreuznach, a small German town an hour or so from Frankfurt. When you're an army brat stationed in Germany, you're in for serious sightseeing duty. You'll be dragged from castles to river cruises to medieval cities that are damp and cold, even in the heart of summer. Your parents will feel it is their solemn obligation to drag you to these places over and over, whenever relatives come to visit, whenever it's a bright and shiny Saturday and there's no football to be played, whenever you complain because the TV stateside is so much better than the lousy Armed Forces network. There are a couple of ways of dealing with your life as a constant tourist. If you're like me, you'll develop a serious comic book habit and never leave home with at least 5 Archies, 3 Beetle Baileys, and a little Lulu or 2 tucked into your backpack. You'll learn how to read comic books while you're walking and how to shove them into the back of your jeans the second your parents turn around to see why you're moving so slow. If you're like TJ, you'll learn how to use a camera. Taking pictures was about the first thing TJ ever did that made him different from the Colonel. The Colonel was the gung-ho type, always in forward motion. But to take pictures, you have to stop, step back, look around. Taking pictures, TJ stood still for once in his life. Up until the time he picked up his first camera, he matched the Colonel stride for stride, no matter where we were. If we were home, you could find the two of them either playing football or working in the yard, also known as the Colonel's domestic domain, digging, watering, weeding, putting pesticide powder on the rose bushes. If we were at the PX or commissary, TJ and the Colonel went into competition mode, seeing who could find the most items on the shopping list the fastest. But the camera slowed TJ down. I think that's why the Colonel never made a big to-do about TJ's pictures the way everybody else did. And TJ's pictures were great. Even I could see what my mother was always saying. TJ had a good eye. You'd look at pictures he had taken of an old stone wall circling around some ancient city, and you'd see things you hadn't seen when you were standing right in front of it. You'd see the images the shadowy parts of the stones made, or the little piece of graffiti someone had drawn where the wall met the ground. The Colonel didn't see the point of it. You can live your life or you can watch it, he'd say every time one of our expeditions got slowed down because TJ wanted to take a picture of something, a statue, a duck waddling down the middle of the road, a little kid who had just dropped his ice cream cone on his lap. But if you're going to watch, stand back, because those of us who choose to live are going to run you down. Just because you never learned how to focus a camera doesn't mean you have to pick on TJ, my mother would chide him. The Colonel always laughed when she said that, but you could tell TJ's photography still got on his nerves somehow. For years, TJ took his film to the PX to be developed, but when we moved to Fort Hood his junior year, he signed up for a photography elective and learned how to develop his film himself. For the most part, his pictures were still a sightseer's pictures. Here's this interesting building. Here's this weird-looking tree over there. See that 1958 Coupe de Ville? But after TJ enlisted, his pictures changed. He started taking pictures of people. 2, he started taking pictures of the moon. Do you really think the moon is all that interesting? I asked him one afternoon when we were sitting in the kitchen after school, not long after TJ had enlisted. His latest pictures spread out all over the table. In some of them, the moon was just a bright blob of light in the night sky. In others, it was thin and sharp-edged as a dime. A comet would be interesting, and a meteor plummeting towards the earth would be very interesting. But the moon just kind of sits there all night. It's got shadows in it, TJ explained. From the craters. I think the shadows are interesting. And I like the idea that now there are human footprints on the moon's surface. There's something pretty cool about that. And I don't know, it's this place in space that people have actually gone to. Can you imagine flying through space to the moon? You ever want to be an astronaut? I traced a full moon in one of TJ's pictures, imagining I could see Neil Armstrong's footprints on its surface. He shook his head. Don't have the brains for it. You've got to be pretty smart to be a doctor. I'm doctor smart, but not astronaut smart. Well, now that you're joining the Army, maybe you'll stay in. And you could be a general. I'll bet you're general smart. TJ grinned. Maybe. Let's see if I'm smart enough to stay alive first. If you're going to be a medic, you won't be in any big battles. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or disappointed about this fact. Are you kidding? Who do you think is out there picking up the wounded? If you want to know the truth, I'd rather have gone into field artillery, but I thought Mom would swallow the medical corps easier. I looked at TJ with greater appreciation. Field artillery. Now that was some serious business. Those were the guys with the mortars and the howitzers. My favorite pictures of TJ's were of the track team. He photographed the races for the school paper, but the really good pictures were the ones of people right after they'd finished running. He'd get right up in their faces, and if you didn't know they were runners, you would think they were witnessing momentous events. Their faces were so joyful or so full of pain, the sweat glistening like tears on their cheeks. I didn't know much about art, but I knew these pictures were beautiful. You go to college, you'll have access to some great darkroom equipment on campus, I'll bet, the colonel said one night after dinner. It was during that period where TJ still had time to walk away from his enlistment contract, and the colonel couldn't keep himself from nudging TJ in that direction. I was pretty sure my mother was putting him up to it. We were out in the backyard working in the garden. TJ leaned against the hoe he had been turning over in the dirt with and said, I'll take my cameras with me to Vietnam. I bet I get some great pictures there. Did it ever occur to you that you might not get sent to Vietnam? The colonel asked. He smiled. You could tell this idea had just come to him, and it cheered him right up. They need medics in all kinds of places. You might get stuck in the desert around Fort Hacienda. They might need you at Fort Dix in New Jersey. You want to give up college for a trip to New Jersey? They're sending everyone to Vietnam these days, sir, I informed the colonel. Not so much to argue with him, but to show him that I was a well-read individual. It was in the Times magazine. They're going to draft 250,000 men to send over there this year. Time magazine doesn't know everything there is to know about what the Army does, the colonel grumbled. He dropped the subject and returned to his tomato plants, which were just beginning to shoot up out of the dirt. But TJ didn't want to drop the subject. I'll be able to take some amazing pictures over there, he said, sounding suddenly excited about the prospect. How far south is Vietnam anyway? It's not in the southern hemisphere, is it? The sky would be completely different if it was.